The naval base erupted with laughter as the elite SEAL trainees mocked the quiet woman who cleaned their equipment. Her worn military patch became their favorite joke, a fake souvenir on a jacket that had seen better days. She never responded, just kept working with her head down, invisible to these warriors in training. They didn't notice how expertly her hands moved across complex equipment. During a ceremony that afternoon, the Admiral himself overheard their mockery and approached the woman. "Where did you find that patch?" he asked with a smirk. Her eyes met his, and the Admiral froze. Slowly, he rolled up his sleeve to reveal an identical patch on his arm. "Every one of you," he commanded the suddenly silent trainees, "salute her immediately. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you believe true heroes often walk unrecognized among us, subscribe to join our community that celebrates hidden courage." The morning sun glinted off the pristine waters surrounding Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado. Seagulls circled overhead as waves crashed against the shoreline, the peaceful scene contrasting with the intensity that defined this legendary military installation. At the administrative building, a woman stood quietly before the human resources officer, her posture straight but unassuming. "Your technical qualifications are impressive, Ms. Vance," the officer noted, sliding paperwork across the desk. "But I should warn you, this environment can be challenging for civilians. You're replacing Treadwell, who was here 30 years. These men respected him." Alara Vance accepted the badge with weathered hands. Her eyes, observant but unrevealing, scanned the credentials briefly before clipping them to her jacket. A faded patch was sewn onto the shoulder, its design partially obscured by a fold in the fabric. "I've worked in difficult environments before," she replied simply. "I'm sure you have," the officer smiled with barely concealed condescension. "Still, the SEAL community is particular. They don't always make outsiders feel welcome." Ilara merely nodded. "I'm here to do a job, not to feel welcome." As the HR officer escorted her across the base, they passed training grounds where SEAL candidates executed punishing physical drills, young men at the peak of physical conditioning being forged into America's most elite warriors. Several glanced up as Alara passed, their expressions ranging from indifference to mild curiosity at the middle-aged woman in civilian clothes. One trainee nudged another, whispering something that made both chuckle. Their laughter followed Alara like an unwelcome shadow as she continued her tour of the facilities. "Maintenance bay is through here," the officer indicated, leading her into a cavernous space filled with equipment. "You'll be responsible for equipment upkeep, environmental systems, and supporting training infrastructure." The space was immaculate, tools arranged with military precision, every surface gleaming. Alara surveyed it with a practiced eye, taking in details others might miss. Her fingers traced the edge of a dive regulator, adjusting its position slightly. "I'll leave you to get settled," the officer said. "Your team will report in about an hour." Left alone, Ilara methodically explored the maintenance bay. Her movements were deliberate and efficient, someone accustomed to assessing new environments quickly. She checked inventory, examined maintenance logs, and reviewed equipment specifications with quiet thoroughness. By midday, Ilara was already deep into systems diagnostics when Lieutenant Commander Adric Blackburn entered with 3 SEAL candidates in tow. Tall, with chiseled features and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to respect, Blackburn barely acknowledged her presence. "This is where all dive equipment is maintained and certified," he explained to the candidates. "Every piece of gear you use undergoes rigorous testing protocols before deployment." "Who's responsible for final certification, sir?" asked one of the candidates. "The maintenance team," Blackburn answered dismissively, "though all operators verify their own equipment as well. Trust, but verify." Ilara continued working silently as they discussed technical specifications of rebreather systems. One of the candidates, a young ensign with an eagerness that bordered on arrogance, noticed her and approached. "You're new," he observed unnecessarily. "Ensign Royce Mercer." "Ilara Vance," she replied simply, continuing her calibration. Royce noticed the faded patch on her worn jacket, a stylized hawk silhouette over water, with markings he didn't recognize. "Did you serve?" he asked, skepticism evident in his tone. Ilara paused, her eyes briefly meeting his. "A lifetime ago." "What branch?" he pressed. "That would be in my file, Ensign," she replied, returning to her work. Her hands moved with surprising dexterity across the complex equipment, making adjustments with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with the systems. Royce's expression shifted from curiosity to mild offense at her non-answer. He rejoined his group, throwing a dismissive glance over his shoulder. The mess hall buzzed with conversation as Alara sat alone with her lunch. She chose a corner table with clear sightlines to all entrances and exits, a habit so ingrained she no longer noticed it. Though she appeared absorbed in her meal, her attention cataloged every conversation, every movement around her. At a nearby table, Ensign Royce sat with fellow candidates Larimore and Tybrook, their voices carrying just enough for her to hear. "So, what's the deal with the new maintenance lady?" Larimore asked, tearing into a protein bar. "Vance? No idea. Doesn't say much," Royce replied. "Did you see that patch she wears?" Larimore continued. "Shadowhawk unit or something? My father was a SEAL for 25 years, says it's totally made up, like from a video game or something. Probably bought it at a surplus store," Tybrook laughed. "Civilians love playing dress-up, pretending they're connected to special operations somehow." "Maybe she had a boyfriend in the service once," Royce suggested, prompting more laughter. Ilara's expression remained perfectly neutral, but her grip tightened slightly on her fork, the only outward sign their words had registered at all. Outside, clouds gathered on the horizon, the bright morning giving way to the threat of afternoon storms. Days stretched into a week as Alara established her routine, arriving before dawn, methodically working through maintenance schedules, staying after most had left. Her efficiency gradually earned grudging respect from the other maintenance staff, who initially viewed her with suspicion, but came to appreciate her competence. Her interactions with the SEAL candidates followed a predictable pattern. Some ignored her completely, just another civilian fixture in their training environment. Others made subtle comments when they thought she couldn't hear, small digs about her age, gender, or civilian status. Ilara absorbed it all with impassive dignity, neither challenging nor acknowledging the casual dismissals. What none observed was how she approached each system with unusual expertise. When repairing complex underwater communication equipment, her hands moved with the confidence of someone who had used such devices operationally, not merely maintained them. When testing emergency breathing apparatus, she inspected elements most technicians overlooked. One evening, working alone, she noticed a hairline stress fracture in a breathing regulator, a flaw so subtle it had passed 3 previous inspections. Without comment, she replaced the component, documented the change, and continued her work. The small notation in the maintenance log was the only evidence of an action that might have saved a life. The maintenance bay was quiet in the late evening hours as Alara completed final checks on navigation systems. Through the partially open door, she overheard Royce and Larimore discussing the next day's training. "Night navigation dive tomorrow," Larimore said. "First real test under pressure." "Should be straightforward," Royce replied. "Though I wish old Treadwell was still here. He always double-checked our gear personally before night dives." "Well, now we've got Grandma in there, instead of someone who knows what they're doing," Larimore laughed. Their voices faded as they continued down the corridor, unaware they'd been overheard. Alara's expression remained unchanged, but something flickered in her eyes. Not hurt, but calculation. The following morning, candidates prepared for the underwater navigation exercise, checking equipment with the confidence of those not yet experienced enough to be properly cautious. Ilara observed the preparations from her workstation, noting small details in their process. After several minutes of internal debate, she approached Lieutenant Commander Blackburn, who supervised the pre-dive checks. "Sir," she said quietly, "the navigation equipment for today's exercise needs recalibration." Blackburn turned, surprise evident on his face, both at her approach and her statement. "Excuse me? The barometric sensors are off by 0.3, she continued. "That's enough to cause disorientation at depth, especially in low visibility conditions." Blackburn's expression shifted to barely concealed irritation. "With all due respect, Ms. Vance, I think our team knows this equipment." "I'm sure they do, sir," Ilara persisted, her tone respectful but firm. "But the equipment was recalibrated after exposure to unusual pressure yesterday. The baselines need to be reset." Something in her quiet confidence gave Blackburn pause. With a sigh, he took the device and ran it through the diagnostic sequence. His expression changed as the results appeared. "How did you catch this?" he asked, recalibrating the equipment. "It's my job, sir," Alara replied simply, already turning back to her station. Blackburn watched her retreat, reassessing the unassuming maintenance supervisor who had potentially prevented a dangerous training incident. Nearby, the candidates who had overheard the exchange exchanged confused glances, their certainty about the civilian maintenance lady momentarily shaken. As weeks passed, Alara's presence became a fixture on base, though she remained as much an enigma as when she arrived. The worn patch on her jacket, a distinctive emblem with a stylized hawk silhouette over water, continued to draw occasional comments and speculation. In the equipment room, candidates prepared for an advanced training evolution while Alara inventoried supplies nearby. "I looked it up," Royce said to his teammates, voice low, but not quite low enough. "Shadowhawk wasn't even a real unit, not in any official Navy records anyway." "My dad served 25 years, Larimore added. "Multiple deployments with Team 6. Never heard of it. Has to be fake." "Stolen valor is what it is," Royce concluded, shaking his head. "Pretending to be something you're not." Alara continued her inventory, giving no indication she'd heard their discussion. Only the slightest tightening around her eyes suggested their words registered at all. Outside, dark clouds had gathered, mirroring the tension within. The base hummed with unusual energy as personnel prepared for a high-profile visit. Every surface gleamed with fresh polish. Uniforms were impeccable, and training exercises had been carefully choreographed for maximum impression. Alara worked methodically to ensure all mechanical systems were operating at peak efficiency. The air filtration system in the main conference center had developed a subtle vibration, nothing that would be noticed by most, but potentially disruptive during quiet briefings. She made the adjustment with practiced hands. "Attention all personnel," came the announcement over the base-wide system. "Admiral James Harrington will be arriving at 0900 tomorrow for the graduation ceremony and strategic assessment." In the candidates' quarters, Lieutenant Commander Blackburn delivered a briefing. "Admiral Harrington is Naval Special Warfare royalty, gentlemen. Over 30 years of service, most of it classified. He's led more operations than you'll ever know about, and his strategic innovations have shaped modern special operations doctrine." Alara, passing by the open door with a toolkit, paused momentarily at hearing the name. For the briefest instant, something flickered across her composed features. Recognition, perhaps, or wariness. Then it was gone, her professional mask firmly back in place as she continued down the corridor. Later that night, in her small off-base apartment, Alara sat alone at her kitchen table. The room was spartanly furnished, functional, impersonal, the space of someone who didn't fully inhabit her own home. After a moment's consideration, she moved to the bedroom and knelt beside the bed, pulling out a locked metal box from beneath it. The box opened with a key she wore around her neck, concealed beneath her clothing. Inside, a folded letter with official seals, a worn photograph face down, and a small velvet case. Her fingers hesitated over the photograph before moving to the case instead. Inside lay a pristine medal, its design matching the insignia on her worn patch. Alara touched it briefly, her expression unreadable, then carefully locked everything away again. As she returned the box to its hiding place, her phone rang, an unknown number. "Yes," she answered, voice neutral. "Is it him?" a tense male voice asked without preamble. "Harrington?" "Yes, he arrives tomorrow." "After 20 years," the voice hesitated. "Are you ready for this?" Alara stood by the window, looking out at the night, her reflection ghostly in the glass. "It doesn't matter if I'm ready," she replied. "It's time." Thunder rumbled in the distance, a storm approaching the coastline. Tomorrow would bring more than just an admiral's visit to Naval Special Warfare Command. It would bring a reckoning 20 years in the making. Dawn broke over the naval base in streaks of gold and crimson as Alara arrived for final preparations. The ceremony would bring together senior leadership, graduating SEAL candidates, and visiting dignitaries. A high-visibility event requiring everything to function flawlessly. She moved through her checks with characteristic thoroughness, testing communication systems, verifying backup generators, ensuring environmental controls were perfectly calibrated. In the demonstration area, she noticed Royce and several candidates examining rappelling equipment for their exhibition, From her position across the room, she observed a subtle issue with their setup. The friction plate was installed backwards, a mistake that might hold initially, but could fail catastrophically under sustained weight. After a moment's debate, she approached the group. "The friction plate needs to be reversed," she said quietly. Royce looked up, surprise giving way to mild annoyance. "Thanks, but we've got this. It's kind of what we're trained for." "The plate is backwards," she repeated, pointing to the specific component. "It'll hold initially, but could fail under sustained weight." The other candidates exchanged skeptical looks, but something in her calm certainty prompted Royce to check the equipment. His expression shifted as he realized she was correct. "How exactly does a maintenance worker know spec ops equipment better than we do?" Larimore asked, eyes narrowing with suspicion. Ilara simply turned away, returning to her own tasks without explanation. Behind her, the candidates exchanged confused glances as they corrected the potentially dangerous error. "That's the second time she's caught something we missed," Tybrook murmured. "Lucky she's around, I guess." "Yeah," Royce agreed, watching Ilara's retreating figure with newfound curiosity. "Lucky." The arrival of Admiral James Harrington transformed the atmosphere on base. Personnel stood straighter, voices lowered to respectful murmurs, and even the most seasoned operators displayed a deference rarely seen in the typically confident SEAL community. A formal greeting line had formed, with command staff arranged by rank to welcome the Admiral and his entourage of high-ranking officers. Ilara worked unobtrusively in the background, ensuring the climate control functioned perfectly as the room filled with bodies and, consequently, heat. From her position near a maintenance panel, she had a clear view of the proceedings while remaining effectively invisible, just another support staff member beneath notice. Admiral Harrington moved down the line with practiced diplomatic efficiency, exchanging brief words with each officer. Beside him walked Commander Freya Callahan, one of the few women in SEAL command leadership, serving as his aide during the visit. As the formalities continued, Commander Callahan's gaze drifted across the room, eventually landing on Ilara. For a moment, her expression remained professional, then changed, a slight narrowing of her eyes, head tilting in sudden interest. To Ilara's surprise, Callahan broke from the procession and approached her directly. "Excuse me," Callahan said, studying Ilara's face intently. "Have we met before?" "I don't believe so, Commander," Ilara responded respectfully, continuing her work. Callahan noticed the patch on Ilara's jacket, her expression changing subtly. "Interesting choice of memorabilia," she commented carefully. "It has sentimental value," Ilara replied, meeting the commander's gaze steadily. For a moment, something unspoken passed between the women. A question formed but not asked, an answer suggested but not given. Then Callahan nodded slightly and returned to the procession. As she rejoined the Admiral, Ilara noticed Callahan lean in to whisper something in his ear. The Admiral gave no visible reaction, but his posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. The ceremony unfolded with military precision, speeches celebrating the achievements of graduating candidates, demonstrations of the capabilities that made naval special warfare operators among the most elite fighting forces in the world. Ilara moved quietly through the proceedings, maintaining systems, occasionally glancing at Admiral Harrington seated in the center of the viewing platform. Though her expression remained professionally neutral, her attention repeatedly returned to the Admiral with an intensity that suggested more than casual interest. During a brief intermission, Royce and fellow candidates approached where she worked adjusting a lighting panel. "Our demonstration is next," Royce said, a hint of his earlier dismissiveness returning now that he was surrounded by peers. "Want to see what real operators look like in action?" Ilara continued her adjustments without responding. Larimore noticed her patch again and couldn't resist a comment. "Seriously, where did you get that thing? My dad served 25 years and says Shadowhawk is total fiction." Ilara paused then, hands stilling on the control panel. "Perhaps your father didn't have the clearance to know," she said quietly. The unexpected response provoked laughter from the candidates. "Lady, my father was a SEAL Team 6 operator," Larimore boasted. "He had access to everything." "Not everything," Ilara responded, returning to her work as the candidates walked away, still chuckling at what they perceived as civilian naivety. The candidates' demonstration proved impressive, a choreographed display of the skills that had earned them places among America's elite warriors. The audience, including Admiral Harrington and visiting dignitaries, applauded appreciatively as the exhibition concluded. Riding high on their successful performance, the candidates passed Alara as they exited the demonstration area. "See that?" Tybrook said loudly enough for her to hear. "That's what real military looks like. Not pretending with fake patches from made-up units," Royce added, the group laughing as they passed. What they failed to notice was Admiral Harrington standing nearby, close enough to overhear this exchange. His conversation with a fellow officer paused mid-sentence. His attention suddenly focused on the group. "What patch is that, Ensign?" he inquired, approaching with measured steps. Royce straightened immediately, suddenly formal in the presence of such senior leadership. "Sir, the maintenance worker wears a patch from something called Shadowhawk. We were just noting that no such unit exists in naval history." The Admiral's expression remained carefully neutral, but something shifted in his eyes. "Is that so?" he murmured, then more directly. "May I see this patch, Ms. Vance, sir?" "Alara Vance," she responded, turning slightly to display the worn emblem on her jacket. Close up, the patch revealed details not visible from a distance, a stylized hawk over water, with specific markings that would be meaningless to most observers. Admiral Harrington studied it in silence, his expression transforming from curiosity to something more complex, shock carefully controlled, recognition dawning behind disciplined features. "Where did you acquire this patch, Miss Vance?" he asked, voice carefully modulated. "It was issued to me, Admiral," she responded, meeting his eyes directly for the first time. A moment of silent communication passed between them, loaded with unspoken history. Commander Callahan observed their interaction intently from a short distance away, her own expression betraying recognition of something significant occurring. "Ensign Royce," the Admiral suddenly asked, "what year was your father born?" Confused by this apparent non sequitur, Royce answered, 1975, sir." "Then he would have been too young," Admiral said cryptically, his gaze still fixed on Alara. He turned to the candidates with unexpected sharpness. "Be careful about dismissing things you don't understand, gentlemen, especially in our line of work." The young men stood confused as Admiral Harrington addressed Alara directly. "Ms. Vance, I believe we have matters to discuss. Would you join me in the command office?" The Admiral's request created an immediate stir. Base personnel watched with undisguised curiosity as Alara was escorted to the commander's office alongside one of the most senior officers in the Navy, an unprecedented honor for a maintenance worker. Through the office windows, observers could see Alara and Admiral Harrington engaged in serious conversation, though the soundproofed room prevented any eavesdropping. After several minutes, Commander Callahan joined them, the door closing firmly behind her. Outside, speculation ran wild among the candidates and junior officers gathered for the ceremony. "Who the hell is she really?" Larimore wondered aloud, watching the three figures through the glass. Lieutenant Commander Blackburn approached the group, his own expression betraying confusion. "I've served here 4 years and never seen the Admiral request a private meeting with maintenance personnel." "Sir, do you know anything about a unit called Shadowhawk?" Royce asked. "The patch she wears?" The Admiral seemed to recognize it. "Never heard of it," Blackburn admitted. "But there are operations and units that don't make it into the history books, especially from certain eras." Inside the office, the conversation continued for nearly 30 minutes. Though observers could see only gestures and expressions, the intensity was evident even through glass. Admiral Harrington speaking with unusual animation, Commander Callahan taking notes, and, most surprisingly, Alara responding with an authority entirely at odds with her maintenance supervisor role. When they finally emerged, all three wore grave expressions. The Admiral whispered final instructions to Alara before rejoining his staff, while Commander Callahan escorted Alara back toward the maintenance bay, their heads close together in continued discussion. Evening fell across the base as the day's ceremonies concluded. Personnel dispersed to barracks and officers' quarters, while support staff completed final tasks before departing. Alara was among the last to leave, securing systems and completing documentation with her usual thoroughness. As she drove off base, she noticed a dark sedan pulling out several cars behind her, maintaining consistent distance, matching her turns with casual precision that might appear coincidental to an untrained observer. Without changing speed or giving any indication she'd noticed, Ilara mentally cataloged her options. At the next intersection, she made a sudden right turn, then another immediate left, a simple evasive pattern to confirm her suspicion. The sedan followed both movements. Her expression hardened as she employed increasingly complex evasive driving techniques with practiced ease, eventually losing her tail in a commercial district before taking an indirect route to her apartment. Inside her sparsely furnished living room, Ilara secured the door and methodically checked each window. As she completed her security sweep, her phone chimed with an incoming text message from an unlisted number. Shaw protocol reactivated, others contacted. She stared at the message for a long moment, then moved with sudden purpose to her bedroom. From beneath the bed, she retrieved the locked box, removing the letter with official seals and the face-down photograph. Finally, she checked a hidden compartment in the closet wall, removing a small case containing a handgun and credentials that bore neither her current name nor her maintenance supervisor title. Her phone rang, Admiral Harrington's secure line. "Are you secure?" he asked without preamble when she answered. "For now, but they've found me." "Then it's happening, after all this time." "Yes, sir. The contingency we prepared for. The base is compromised. Trust no one except Callahan." After ending the call, Ilara stood motionless in the center of her apartment, the maintenance supervisor persona falling away like a discarded garment. Her posture straightened, her eyes sharpened with focused intensity, and her movements became precisely controlled as she prepared for what would come next. The woman who arrived at the base the following morning was Ilara Vance only in appearance. The careful anonymity, the deliberate ordinariness she had cultivated for months, had been replaced by something else entirely, something the base personnel had never been meant to see. Morning brought heightened security across the base, additional checks at entry points, increased patrols, and a general atmosphere of alert watchfulness that the regular personnel attributed to the Admiral's continued presence. Ilara arrived for her shift on schedule, but with subtle differences apparent to anyone paying close attention. Her movements were more economical, her awareness more acute, and beneath her maintenance uniform, the outline of a concealed sidearm was visible if one knew to look for it. As she crossed the central courtyard, Lieutenant Commander Blackburn intercepted her path. "Ms. Vance," he called, his tone carefully professional but underlined with new wariness. "A moment, please." She stopped, facing him with neutral expression. "Yes, Commander? There are rumors circulating about you," he said without preamble. "What kind of rumors?" she asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. "That you're not who you claim to be, that the Admiral knows you somehow." Blackburn studied her face carefully, looking for any reaction. "That your background isn't what your employment file states." "Perhaps you should ask the Admiral," she responded evenly. "I intend to. Security is my responsibility here." "Then you might want to check the new contractor who arrived last week," Ilara said, her tone shifting subtly from subordinate to advisor. "His credentials need verification." Blackburn blinked, surprised by both the information and her authoritative tone. "How would you know that?" Before she could answer, an emergency alert sounded throughout the base, the distinctive pattern indicating security breach. Personnel froze momentarily, then moved with practiced efficiency toward predetermined security positions. "All personnel, Security Protocol Delta," came the overhead announcement. "Unidentified intruders on base. This is not a drill." Armed response teams mobilized across the compound as Blackburn received urgent information through his tactical radio. His expression darkened as he listened. "Multiple armed intruders at the eastern perimeter," he reported. "Possible hostage situation at the communications building." He turned to direct Ilara to a secure area, only to find her already moving, not toward shelter, as protocols dictated for support personnel, but directly toward the center of the emerging crisis. "Ms. Vance," he called after her, "you need to seek shelter immediately." She turned briefly, removing her maintenance uniform jacket to reveal tactical clothing underneath. From a concealed holster, she drew a weapon with practiced ease that spoke of years of operational experience. "You might want to stay behind me, Lieutenant Commander," she said, with quiet authority that stopped him in his tracks. In that moment, before his eyes, the maintenance supervisor transformed completely. Her stance, her expression, her entire bearing suddenly revealing the unmistakable presence of a veteran operator. "Who are you?" he asked, the question emerging in genuine bewilderment. Alara checked her weapon with efficient movements that no maintenance supervisor should possess. "Someone who anticipated this day would come," she answered. "Now, if you want to protect this base, follow me." Chaos engulfed the eastern section of the base as armed intruders breached multiple security points simultaneously. Their coordinated movements and tactical precision suggested military or intelligence training. These were professionals executing a carefully planned operation. Security personnel responded admirably, but found themselves outmaneuvered by attackers who demonstrated intimate knowledge of base protocols and layout. Alarms blared across the compound as communication systems reported intermittent jamming. Alara moved with tactical precision through the complex, using service corridors and maintenance access points to avoid the main confrontation areas. Unlike the base security forces moving in standard formations, she navigated like someone with intimate knowledge of both the facility and covert operations methodology. Lieutenant Commander Blackburn followed her, struggling to reconcile the maintenance supervisor he'd known for months with a combat-ready operator now leading him through his own base. "We need to reach the communications building," Alara said, checking each intersection before proceeding. "That's their primary target." "How do you know that?" Blackburn demanded. "Because that's where I'd go," she replied simply. "Server room houses classified personnel files, including inactive special operations units." Rounding a corner, they encountered Royce, Larimore, and Tybrook pinned down by gunfire in a connecting hallway. The candidates had responded to the emergency with commendable courage, but were clearly outmatched by the professional attackers. Without hesitation, Alara took position beside them, quickly assessing the tactical situation. "3 hostiles, northeast corridor, using base security weapons," she stated with calm precision. The candidates stared at her in confusion. The maintenance supervisor's transformation into tactical operator momentarily more shocking than the danger they faced. "Cover the west corridor," she instructed. "Controlled bursts only. They're wearing body armor. Aim for exposure points." Royce, confused but desperate for direction, challenged her. "Who are you to give orders?" She ignored the question, already moving to a flanking position. With practiced efficiency, she neutralized 2 attackers using non-lethal takedown techniques that spoke of advanced close-quarters combat training. Commander Callahan arrived with a security team moments later, weapon drawn. She acknowledged Alara with a respectful nod. "Good to have you back, Captain." The title hung in the air as the candidates' expressions transformed from confusion to shock. "Captain?" Larimore echoed, disbelief evident in his voice. "Secure these 2 for questioning," Alara directed the security team, indicating the subdued attackers. "They'll have information we need." "Yes, ma'am," responded the security team leader without hesitation, deferring to her authority despite her civilian clothing. Callahan turned to the bewildered candidates. "You 3, escort Ms. Vance to the command center. Admiral's orders." "What's happening?" Royce demanded as they moved through the corridors, now following Alara rather than leading her. "Your base is under attack by former intelligence operatives," she replied tersely. "They're targeting specific information." "And you knew this was coming?" Tybrook asked incredulously. "It's why I was placed here," she confirmed, checking each intersection before proceeding. Admiral Harrington had established an emergency command center in the secure communications building. Tactical displays showed the security situation across the base, with multiple incursion points highlighted in red. When Alara entered with the candidates, senior officers looked up with evident relief rather than surprise at her presence. The Admiral immediately gestured her forward. "Status report, Captain Vance," he requested, ignoring the confused expressions of junior officers present. Alara delivered a tactical assessment with authority that stunned onlooking personnel. 3 teams of 4, former intelligence operatives with advanced tactical training. They're using jamming technology to disrupt communications and accessing the North Server corridor through maintenance tunnels. "Targets?" the Admiral asked. "They're after the secure server room," she responded confidently. "This isn't random terrorism. They're targeting specific intelligence." Admiral Harrington's expression darkened. "The Shadowhawk files," Alara nodded grimly. "They're trying to identify all former operatives." Lieutenant Commander Blackburn, who had joined them in the command center, looked between the Admiral and Alara with growing confusion. "Shadowhawk was real?" he asked incredulously. The Admiral and Alara exchanged glances. It's time they knew, the Admiral decided. With the base still under partial lockdown and security teams engaged with the remaining intruders, Admiral Harrington addressed the assembled officers and candidates in the command center. 20 years ago, our military faced missions where traditional operators couldn't succeed, he began, his voice carrying the weight of classified history. Environments where men, regardless of skill or training, would be immediately identified as American military personnel. The room had fallen completely silent, all attention focused on the Admiral's unprecedented disclosure. Project Shadowhawk was created, an all-female special operations unit designed for missions where women could operate invisible to enemy expectations. In cultures where women were overlooked or dismissed, our operators moved undetected, gathering intelligence and executing operations that no traditional team could approach. He gestured toward Alara, who stood at parade rest beside him. Their existence was classified at the highest level. Most military leadership didn't know they existed. Their missions remain among the most classified operations in our history. Alara maintained her professional demeanor as decades of secrecy were dismantled in a single briefing. Captain Alara Vance was Shadowhawk's commander, the Admiral continued. Her unit conducted 17 critical operations that changed the course of conflicts you've read about in history books. Operations that saved hundreds of American lives, including an entire SEAL team trapped behind enemy lines in 2003. The stunned silence that followed was profound, especially from the candidates who had mocked her. Royce, Larimore, and Tybrook exchanged glances of disbelief mingled with dawning respect. "Why is she here, now?" Lieutenant Commander Blackburn asked, breaking the silence. "Because someone is systematically identifying and targeting former Shadowhawk operatives," Admiral Harrington explained. "Captain Vance was placed here as part of a protective operation when intelligence suggested this base might be compromised." "Placed here by whom?" Blackburn pressed. "By me," the Admiral answered simply, "to protect both this installation and the remaining Shadowhawk personnel." As the implications of this revelation settled across the room, security updates continued to stream in. The situation was deteriorating, with attackers reaching increasingly sensitive areas of the base. Alara studied the tactical displays with focused intensity. "There are former intelligence operatives with specific knowledge of this facility," she assessed. "Standard response protocols won't be effective." "What do you suggest, Captain?" Admiral Harrington asked, the title now used openly. "Let me take lead on the response," she replied without hesitation. "I know how these people think and operate." Blackburn stepped forward, professional concern overriding his amazement at the unfolding situation. "With respect, sir, we have current active duty operators who—" "Lieutenant Commander," the Admiral interrupted firmly, "Captain Vance wrote half the tactical protocols this base still uses. She knows the attacker's methodology better than anyone here. Stand down." The rebuke was delivered with quiet authority that brooked no further objection. Blackburn nodded stiffly, accepting the decision despite his reservations. Alara quickly organized response teams, pairing experienced operators with the most promising candidates. To everyone's surprise, she specifically requested Royce, Larimore, and Tybrook for her team. "They've seen the attacker's tactics firsthand," she explained simply, though her selection carried an unmistakable secondary purpose, a test of their ability to follow her leadership after their previous dismissal of her. Alara led her team through the complex with confident efficiency, using her intimate knowledge of the facility to anticipate the attacker's movements. The candidates followed her lead, witnessing firsthand the tactical brilliance that had once made Shadowhawk so effective. "They'll be headed for the secure server room through the maintenance tunnels," she explained as they moved. "Standard assault teams would approach through main corridors. We'll intercept from service access points they won't expect to be monitored." Her prediction proved accurate. As they emerged from a maintenance shaft, they encountered the leader of the attack force, a lean, hard-faced man Alara identified immediately. "Vasquez," she said, weapon trained on the former intelligence operative. "I wondered if you were behind this." The man smiled coldly, his own weapon held ready but not yet aimed. Behind him, 2 other attackers secured their position in the corridor leading to the server room. "You were supposed to stay hidden, Vance," he replied. "All of you ghosts should have stayed buried." "Hard to stay buried when someone keeps digging," she countered. "Why now, after all this time?" "You know why?" Vasquez responded. The files are being digitized. Your unit is transitioning from myth to official history. Some of us prefer you remain forgotten. Some of us? Ilara pressed, maintaining her position while signaling the candidates to secure the flanks. There are those who invested considerable resources ensuring Shadowhawk remained buried, Vasquez explained. People who would be compromised if certain operations became known. Understanding dawned in Ilara's eyes. This isn't about protecting intelligence assets. It's about covering up what we witnessed. The women who see everything and go unnoticed, Vasquez agreed. A liability that should have been eliminated years ago. His slight gesture signaled his associates to prepare for engagement. Before they could move, Commander Callahan's security team approached from the opposite corridor, effectively surrounding the intruders. "It's over, Vasquez," Ilara stated calmly. "Lower your weapon." For a tense moment, it seemed Vasquez might risk a final, desperate action. Then, calculating his odds, he slowly placed his weapon on the ground. "This doesn't end with me," he warned as security personnel secured him. "There are others who won't let Shadowhawk resurface." "Let them come," Ilara replied simply. With the immediate threat neutralized, security teams swept the base, confirming all intruders had been captured or neutralized. In the command center, Admiral Harrington received the all-clear with visible relief. "Damage assessment?" he asked. "Server room secure, no data compromised," reported a communications officer. 3 personnel with minor injuries, no fatalities. The Admiral turned to Ilara, who had returned with her team. "Well done, Captain. Your assessment?" "Targeted operation with limited objectives," she replied. "Professional, but restrained. They wanted information, not casualties." "And the mastermind?" "Still out there," Ilara confirmed grimly. "Vasquez is an operative, not an architect." As the immediate crisis subsided, the base gradually returned to normal operations, though with heightened security. Personnel viewed Ilara with new eyes, the invisible maintenance worker now recognized as someone of significance. The following morning, Admiral Harrington called an assembly of all base personnel. Under clear blue skies, with the sea breeze carrying the scent of salt air across the parade ground, he stood before the gathered forces. "Yesterday's events revealed truths long classified," he began. "Today I wish to formally recognize someone who has served this nation with distinction, often without acknowledgement or thanks." Ilara stood at attention beside him, now dressed in a formal officer's uniform that displayed her true rank. Captain Ilara Vance commanded Shadowhawk, an all-female special operations unit that conducted some of the most critical missions in recent military history, the Admiral continued. For 2 decades, their contributions remained classified at the highest level, their sacrifices unrecognized. He turned to face Ilara directly. Today, that changes. In a gesture that spoke volumes, Admiral Harrington removed his own service jacket, rolling up his sleeve to reveal a pristine version of the same patch she wore, the Shadowhawk emblem, preserved as a reminder of operations few knew existed. Captain Vance wasn't just any Shadowhawk operative, he announced to the assembled personnel. She led the mission that rescued 34 members of SEAL Teams 2 and 4 in 2003, including my own son. A murmur ran through the assembled ranks. The Admiral turned to face the SEAL candidates directly, his gaze finding Royce, Larimore, and Tybrook in the front row. "Every one of you, stand at attention and salute her," he commanded. "Captain Vance and her team are the reason many of you had fathers who came home." The entire assembly rose in perfect formation, rendering a formal military salute to Ilara. Royce, Larimore, and Tybrook's faces showed profound respect mixed with shame at their previous behavior. Ilara returned the salute with perfect military precision, her expression revealing nothing of the emotions this moment of recognition might have stirred after decades of anonymity. The days that followed brought significant changes to Naval Special Warfare Command. Ilara, now openly acknowledged as Captain Vance, moved through the facility with the same quiet efficiency that had characterized her time as a maintenance supervisor, but now met with the respect her position deserved. She encountered Blackburn in the officers' mess, where he struggled with an appropriate apology. "Captain, I never meant to—" Ilara cut him off gently. "You responded to what you saw, Commander. That was the point of my cover. But we treated you like someone beneath notice," she finished for him, "which made me the perfect guardian for this base." Blackburn nodded, accepting the lesson with professional humility. Will you be taking a command position now that your identity is known? No, she replied. My mission here is complete. Others will take over the security protocols. Later that week, Ilara met with the candidates who had once mocked her, now deeply respectful in her presence. The most important lesson in special operations isn't about weapons or tactics, she told them. It's about perception and assumptions. The people who will defeat you aren't those who look most threatening, she continued. They're those you never see coming because you decided they weren't worth noticing. The candidates absorbed her words in thoughtful silence. What happens to Shadowhawk now? Royce finally asked. Will its history be declassified? Some operations must remain classified, Ilara responded. But the unit's existence will now be acknowledged, thanks to yesterday's events. Admiral Harrington and Ilara walked the base perimeter on her final day, discussing the future of the programs she had helped establish. The younger officers need to know this history, Admiral insisted. What Shadowhawk accomplished should be taught, not hidden. With proper context, Ilara agreed. Not as an exception, but as an example of how perception creates blind spots, both for enemies and allies. They reached the training area, where Blackburn was instructing candidates. To their surprise, he was teaching them about recognizing expertise regardless of rank or appearance. The best operator I ever met spent months fixing equipment in this very room, and none of us had the wisdom to see it, they overheard him tell his class. That failure of observation would be fatal in the field. Ilara prepared to leave the base, packing her few belongings. Outside her quarters, she found the candidates waiting for her. Larimore stepped forward. Captain, I called my father last night, told him about Shadowhawk. And? Ilara asked. He cried, Larimore said simply. Said he was in that SEAL team in 2003. That women he never saw saved him when he was wounded. He never knew who they were. Now he does, Ilara responded quietly. Royce stepped forward, holding something. A new patch, identical to her worn one. We had this made. The Admiral approved it, he explained. What for? Ilara asked. For us, Tybrook answered. If you'll allow it, Captain, we'd like to form a training unit to learn what Shadowhawk knew about operating unseen. The Admiral's creating a new program, Royce added, for operators who can work without being noticed. He's calling it Echohawk. And who will command this unit? Ilara asked. That's why we're here, Larimore responded, to ask if you'd consider staying, as our instructor. 6 months later, a new training course was underway. Ilara, now in formal instructor uniform, watched candidates navigate a complex scenario. Among them, female candidates integrated with males, all wearing the Shadowhawk patch on their training gear. Admiral Harrington joined her, observing the exercises. They're learning, he commented. Some faster than others, Ilara responded with slight smile. A new group of officers toured the facility, one making dismissive comment about a female candidate struggling with a physical obstacle. Ilara approached, still with same quiet demeanor that once made her invisible. Something to add, Lieutenant? She asked softly. The officer, not recognizing her, replied, Just wondering if the standards have been lowered, ma'am. Admiral Harrington watched with amusement as Ilara smiled. Perhaps you'd care to join us for a demonstration, she suggested. The visiting officers stood dumbfounded as Ilara effortlessly completed a tactical course that left them exhausted. Royce, now an instructor himself, addressed the visitors. Gentlemen, never judge operators by anything except their capability. That's the first lesson of Echohawk. And the hardest to learn, Ilara added, walking away across the training field. The morning sun glinted off the water, just as it had on her first day at the base. But now, as she watched the new generation of operators train, she wore her patch openly, no longer a symbol of hidden sacrifice, but of excellence finally recognized. The Invisible Woman had become a visible legend, not through seeking recognition, but through simply being the best at what she did until circumstances forced others to see what had been in front of them all along.